The positive rate for performance-enhancing substances in 2003 testing was in the range of 5 to 7%.
Hernandez made only 6. Canseco bids for the second homer of the inning. If it's fair, he's got it.
Whoa.
And it settles into the upper deck.
Oh, my goodness.
It wasn't a problem. There wasn't anyone that said, don't do it, or you shouldn't do it, or if you get caught, this is going to happen to you. It was acceptable in the 80s and mid to late 90s as a cup of coffee.
But like a scene from The Natural, Schilling climbs the mound and prepares to take on this Yankee lineup.
I guess that maybe 5 to 10 of my teammates in the last 15 years were using. I'm 5 in the last 15 years. Maybe.
Runners going. There's a swing. That ball well hit right field. High and deep and gone. A home run.
Let me start by telling you this. I have never used steroids.
Swung on, there she goes. Number 62. Move over, Big Mac. You got company.
I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, I don't have too much to tell you.
Down the left field line. Is it enough? Gone! There it is!
I'm not here to discuss the past. I'm here to be positive.
Created a legacy off of me just being honest. And the fake ones hate, but it's all to no avail. They want to see me lose, but you know I never fail.
Hello and welcome back to Sports Talk with Dad, a show where we talk about sports based on our own generational perspectives, and today we are going to test those generational perspectives. As always, my name is Kyle, and I could not call this Sports Talk with Dad without the man sitting next to me, a man who was alive before steroids even existed, my dad Tim.
Hey everybody, and yes, this may be our most controversial video we've ever done.
So we're going to disagree completely. This man thinks that the steroid era baseball should not be in the Hall of Fame. I believe that all the steroid era should be in the Hall of Fame. I believe they made a huge impact on the sport. But before we get started, I need you guys to do me one favor. We're trying to grow this channel, and I need you to go into here. I picked the right direction at
Well
that
done.
point. I need you to go here. I need you to like and subscribe and hit that little bell notification just to make sure you get to watch these videos and enjoy them as much as we enjoy making them. And please share them with your friends as well. But without further ado, you're wrong.
Well, I'm glad you're so subtle about it.
Here's the thing. All right, I'm going to start with my side of the argument. I got into baseball in 1998. I'll never forget. It's one of my favorite stories of all time. We're watching Kerry Wood, where you're sitting in the living room watching a game. You call me into the room and say, watch this. You're never going to see this again. 20 strikeouts later, I'm in awe. I want to go to Wrigley Field. I want to see the Cubs play. I want to see Kerry Wood pitch. And we go 2 times that year and watch Sammy Sosa hit 3 home runs. And I was hooked. I was a Cubs fan ever since. I was a baseball fan ever since. And it crushed me to see what happened, with the steroid era and everything of that. But at the same time, I'm not as big of a baseball fan. I'm not as enthralled as a kid. I'm not glued to the TV like I was without Sosa and McGuire going after records.
And granted, I was into it as well. But that was before I found out they had actually cheated to get where they were going. And that it broke my heart. As far as I'm concerned, Hank Aaron is still all-time home run record holder, and Roger Maris still holds the single season record holder because they didn't cheat to get there.
I mean, and just to get into this in case you don't know what the steroid era of baseball is for whatever reason, right? So 1998 was the all-time home run race, right? You had Sosa and you had McGuire going at it, home run after home run. You were always tuned in. And then in 2005, all of a sudden there's a giant congressional hearing where baseball players like Sosa and McGuire and Palmeiro was there.
And Canseco, was he there?
Canseco was there. You had Curt Schilling was there as well. Talking about the steroid era, who used steroids, who didn't, and it became this whole thing, and it really wrecked a whole era of baseball, and Canseco started it off by writing a book.
He did, and he's not only a villain in some people's minds, he's also a hero as far as I'm concerned, because he put a mirror up to baseball and said, guys, you've got to do something about this. And the baseball, the commissioner's office, and the owners started doing testing in the minor leagues. And it wasn't until the players themselves dragged Don Fear kicking and screaming across the finish line and they can hit. To their credit, they stepped up and said, "We've got to get this out of our game. It's ruining it."
And they did, but okay, let's start from the very beginning here, because I really want to hear your perspective on this, on why these guys shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. It's something that we had never seen before, right? Which we had talked about with our Honus Wagner argument, right? Where I said he was the most overrated player of all time. You're holding players of a different era and a different game to the standards of today. Let me finish. I hear you coming, but it's a whole different era. You have to hold it as a different era completely. And I understand that, and everybody else should as well. But what tuned people in is that there was no argument of there was nothing greater to be seen. Nobody had seen that in baseball before. And how often can you say, here's something in baseball you've never seen?
Are you done?
I'm good. You can go now.
So, baseball is the greatest game ever invented. And then a big part of what makes it great is I could show you and we can talk and compare Hank Aaron to Babe Ruth, Willie Mays to Ken Griffey Jr., and go on about who were the greatest players of all time, Ted Williams to Tony Gwynn. The steroid era robbed everyone of the greatest record in all of sports, the all-time home run record, which is still, in my mind, 755, and Hank Aaron owns it. He was the greatest home run hitter of all time. And it took a cheater to rob him of the record. And I'll go to what Hank Aaron said when he was filming his half-hearted congratulations to the cheater, who will remain nameless. And the guy said, "Hey, can we do it one more time? And can we get you to smile?" And he looked at the guy doing the recording and said, "Just exactly what do I have to smile about?"
Yeah, and I'll name him Barry Bonds, right? He's known as one of the biggest cheaters of all time, and I can't stand Barry Bonds. I'm right there with you. I think he took it to a whole new level. But at the same time, you had a lot of people using steroids at that time, so you can't really say that these records were uneven. You had pitchers using the steroids at that point. The ERA at that time in the 90s, somebody won a Cy Young with a 5-point-something ERA.
Sure, balls were flying out, but you look at Curt Schilling, who said he thought it was 5 to maybe 10%, or 10 people that he knew that used steroids.
Right,
I think the real
teams.
number is probably in that 10 to 15% range.
Maybe, but
of
listen
all
to
players.
this. Listen to this, because this is Canseco talking about right here.
Canseco?
When I mentioned the 80%, I mentioned at the peak of steroid use. That may have been somewhere from 94 on to the year 2000. That's when I played.
Okay.
So Canseco's sitting there saying 80% of baseball players from 94 to the early 2000s when he was playing were using steroids.
I think that number is grossly exaggerated. Granted, he took steroids wherever he played into the clubhouse.
He did.
And said, look what it's done for me.
He introduced McGuire. He definitely introduced Palmeiro. A number of other guys, I'm sure, on that list as well.
Right. And like I said, I think the true real number is in that 10 to 15% range. There was a guy, Brady Anderson, hit 50 home runs. He never was close to it before, and he was never close to it when he got off the juice. It affects the game in a way where it robs you of being able to compare eras. It robs players who are doing it honestly. All of a sudden, they're going against guys like he who shall not be named, who's all armored up. You can't pitch inside to him. And because he's so juiced, I mean, my God, his head grew.
He is. Well, Bonds is a different ball game. I look at this other steroid users versus Bonds in this way. You know my favorite all-time board game is Clue, right?
Sure.
I love the game Clue. To me, you look at Sosa, McGuire, Canseco, they're like players that, the card gets passed when they ask for it and they peek at that card, right? And they're like, oh, you just showed them that the library is not the answer, and they write it down. Bonds, to me, is he took the little card holder in the middle and looked at the answers and then just went right to the middle and made the guess. Bonds used an immense amount of steroids.
As did Sosa. He was a tiny guy when he came up, and he juiced until he was this massive player. He was never that great of a ball player until he started juicing. So in his mind, I'm sure the ends justified the means.
I mean,
But-
Sosa had a good batting average. I mean,
But he was never a power hitter.
It's hard to say. Sosa started really young in his career. I mean, I don't know where you could judge it from. I don't think we ever truly saw Sosa.
I saw
without
Sosa
juice
with the
in his
White
system.
Sox.
But, I mean, at that point, I think he was still using steroids.
He hadn't grown to what he was, the size he was.
No, he definitely filled out.
With the
and
Cubs.
The winds of Wrigley definitely helped him get a few extra feet on that ball as well.
It did. And I look at a guy like McGuire, who is a big guy to start with, and he just grew from there. I think his congressional appearance could have changed the way we viewed that whole era, and we've talked about this
You
for
and I
years.
agree on this one. I'm not here to talk about the past.
Right, that was just silly because he had androstenedione in his locker, a supplement not kind of like creatine, but not like creatine, but it was a supplement. You can buy it at GNC.
It's something that your body produces naturally. It's definitely not like steroids. People consider it to be steroids, but all it is it's not. It's a part of the testosterone building process, right? Without the rest of the supplements that make testosterone, it's just one part of the testosterone building process.
You're not shooting it in, and I'll reference this in a minute, but I want to finish up with McGuire. But there was a great video I watched that I'll walk you through in a minute, and we'll link in the comments below. Right. But McGuire, if he would have went to that congressional hearing and looked at the Congress people and said, look, everybody saw what was in my locker. It wasn't illegal. I used it to recover. That's all it was really there for. It doesn't build your muscles to any great extent. But it was legal at the time. In retrospect, this is not something that any kid should ever use. I don't use it anymore because I realize the perception it gives younger people watching me play. If he would have went down that path, I think McGuire has looked much differently than he is now.
Yeah, especially if you would have referenced the younger generation and saying, listen, I'm here to be a role model, and it's not good, because that is a huge effect on younger individuals, right?
Mhm.
Their bodies aren't as developed, and just the drop off after a cycle, what it does to your brain and the depression it throws you in. I mean, there's a lot of people of the 17, 18, 19 generation that, unfortunately took their own lives due to the downfall of steroid usage
When you're coming
off
of
the
it.
cycle.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem.
But here's the other thing about this, and the video I'm referencing was by a group called Gravity Transformation Fat Loss Experts. And I encourage everyone to go and watch this video. It was done very, very well.
It is.
So there's something in our bodies called myon nuclei. If I'm saying it right, and I'm probably
not. 10 times fast.
Myon nuclei.
Right.
Some people have more of it naturally. Other people don't. When you start injecting yourself with steroids, you build more and more and more of that. And even if you stop, those myon nuclei stay in your body forever.
They do.
And it really alters your physique for the rest of your life. So the guy in here said, look, that's why some people say that if you're caught using steroids, you should be banned for life because you have fundamentally changed your body. And I think anybody who's seen some of those players that have used, that happens to. Their head gets big. They get more aggressive. You break out in acne. I mean, I told you when I worked in Minneapolis, Vern Gagne came in and he had one of his wrestlers. Vern Gagne is an old-time wrestler. And one of his proteges was roided out of his mind. He was perspiring really heavy. He had acne everywhere. And you could tell. And the guy ended up dying within 6 months of after I met him. Not Vern Gagne, but the guy that was with him.
Right.
Just because of the very things you said. It just changes your yourself on a nuclear level, and that changes the game itself. And that's why these guys should never see. You had mentioned, well, I don't think they should be, we should make a special room, because I agree. I've always said there should be a special room in the Hall of Fame for the Babe Ruths, the Ted Williams, the Hank Aaron's, the Willie Mays, those people, the Ken Griffey Jr. to be more modern. They're the greatest of the greats. If the Hall of Fame wants to build an extra room and make it smell like vomit and garbage and put all these junkies and these steroid users in there, go ahead.
Well, yes, you're right. It does
So
change.
nobody wants to go in that room.
Right. It changes you because it does. It changes how much your muscles can grow. Right.
Correct.
Your muscles can permanently grow bigger when you take steroids. While you're taking them, it increases your protein synthesis, right? It stops the muscle from breaking down. But like you said, it takes those molecules and literally changes your muscle forever. Your muscle can officially grow bigger than it ever has in the past. So I definitely agree when it comes to the point of steroid users should be banned for life, because it does change you personally. That's not my argument. My argument here is that it happened. And not only did it happen, it brought more attention to baseball than it had seen in decades. Football in the 90s was starting to take over. You had Brett Favre, you had Steve Young, you had Troy Aikman, you had Emmitt Smith. You had a lot of good things going on there. And baseball had taken a big hit. You had the strike in 94. They canceled the World Series. People weren't paying attention to it. And all of a sudden, you have something that's so unbelievable that you've never seen it before. You never thought you'd see it before. Somebody hitting 60 home runs, let alone two guys doing it at the same time. That McGuire hitting 62 against the Cubs in St. Louis, where you saw in the video in the beginning here, where they're literally doing each other's, the bump and the fist, and then the kissing of the fingers and the piece, right?
It was
that
a whole big
was
production.
A huge thing. I mean, it was one of the greatest moments in baseball history, and it's been erased from time because of steroid use. But why shouldn't that still be celebrated? That was still an amazing moment.
It stole the records of people who worked their lives. Roger Maris actually was losing his hair because of the pressure he was under to get to 61, which he did on the last day of the season. He and Mickey Mantle were in a race to see which one or both could possibly do it. Very similar situation. Mantle got hurt, so he was out of the race. Maris took on the race on his own. The media pressure, he was in New York, was immense, and he broke the record on the last day. And that record should have been celebrated until today, but cheaters came in and they stole the record. And I watched with you. We were watching together, and I celebrated it until I found out how badly they cheated. And then I was just like, really?
But I mean, think about it. That's when, for you and I, Sports Talk with Dad started, right?
It did.
That's when you and I bonded immensely over baseball. That's when you and I bonded going to games. That's when you and I bonded over sports. I had my Sosa jersey. I had my Kerry Wood. Kerry Wood was plastered all over my room, right? I was
Well,
a
and
huge
Kerry Wood would have been
fan.
anyways. I'm going to argue that you still would have become a baseball lover and fan after Kerry Wood and going to the games.
Sure.
Even without it, because it was a whole Wrigley Field experience. We won't talk about the special days when you were in high school, where you might have been seen on TV.
Television watching.
That's another story.
Being at the game when I was supposed to be at school, but that's a different story. That was my Ferris Bueller day. I guess my point is that, again, an amazing moment, right?
Sure.
And if you believe Canseco, if that many people were using, I mean, what's the difference? And here's one thing I have to say too: HGH steroids have been in the game a lot longer than we give credit for. You look at Sandy Koufax. There's proof now that Sandy Koufax used HGH to recover.
Okay, and here I'm going to stop you there, because I don't have a problem with these guys under a doctor's care using HGH or steroids in a very small capacity to recover. I had hip surgery 7 or 8 years ago, and I actually used steroids during that time to recover afterwards, and I recovered months faster than I should have otherwise, and it was
Right.
very good for that.
You're on doctor's care and everything,
Yeah,
and it makes
exactly.
perfect sense to do that. And that's what you want from athletes, right? They're getting older. You want to be able to use this stuff. We have players, like I said, Sandy Koufax doesn't even make it to age 31 without these new treatments that had come out at that time to help him continue
But
to perform.
they were short-term usage, and they weren't used to enhance performance. They were used to recover.
But to use your argument against you, right? All of a sudden that changes your molecules in your muscle from then on. So should Sandy Koufax be in the Hall of Fame?
Of course, he should be.
Then why shouldn't the guys in the 90s
Because
be
they
in the Hall
took
of
it to
Fame?
the next level and they abused it, and they took so much of it that they really grew in size. McGuire's a bigger guy than when he was in Oakland, and that could have been from working out, but we know it wasn't. It was because
But
he was
McGuire's
juicing.
using the stuff to recover, right?
He
Do I
was
think he abused it? Yes, but he was definitely using the stuff to recover. He was just coming off injury.
He was abusing it to grow and to hit the ball farther. He stopped using it to recover. If he was using Andro to recover, fine. Knock yourself out. That's not going to affect you. You're going to pee most of it out anyways. If it helps you recover, I'm good with that. Andy Pettit's another one, as I said earlier, that used it, admitted using them to recover. And he stopped as soon as he was back in the game. If they're working with their doctors and the doctors are working with the trainers, short term, I'm talking, to use my case, 30 days. Done.
Right.
You know, I'm not a huge
I agree. I
weightlifter.
think this has gotten such a huge stigma, and it is because of younger kids abusing it, right? That's a huge one. You look at Mr. Olympia. Obviously, those guys are juicing out of their mind, right? You want to get that perfect physique because you have this body dysmorphia. But at the same time, there's this huge stigma against it that doctors aren't even prescribing this for healthy uses. And like you said, this could be something used to help people recover. There's a place in our society for these type of medicines because that's what it really is. It's unfortunate that something like this gets abused, right? But like you said, older guys, have hip surgery. We want to recover faster. Athletes that are older that we want to recover faster. If you're going to have a big surgery, why wouldn't you get that type of treatment? Because it's going to make that muscle stronger. We're talking player safety, right? If we're going to be having players that we want them to be healthy long term, why wouldn't we permanently make sure their muscles can hold up long term?
Because we're talking about the razor's edge here, where we go from using it to recover or using it to enhance your performance. And the problem is these guys never started or never stopped using. And I look at a guy like A-Rod.
Doctors care.
I look at A-Rod. I look at Ryan Braun. Both guys used it when they were in their teens, and they just never stopped using it.
Correct.
And that's where I've got a problem. Palmeiro is a pariah because he looked in the eye of the Congress people. I said they never used it,
and
he was found
3 weeks later.
3 weeks or 30 days later, he's found. So you've got people like that are they're lying to themselves most of all. Ryan Braun, you and I have talked about it.
Ryan Braun is the most disgusting human being on the face of the earth.
He is just the lowest form of.
But Ryan Braun used steroids and then lied about it and tried to ruin somebody's life.
Correct. And that's why I'm hoping the Brewers never, ever retire his number. Sorry, Brewers fans. But
no, he shouldn't be. I mean, he's a disgusting human being. Yeah. He and Bonds have a special place for that type of stuff.
Exactly.
For people that continue to lie about it. Braun, in my opinion, worse. Because not only did he lie about it, he went after a tester who was just out there doing his job, got him fired, and pretty much ruined his entire career until he finally came out. It's like, yeah, by the way, totally I've been using steroids this whole time.
And it cost him his friendship with Rogers, as everybody in Wisconsin knows. I'm sure the tester has been very well paid by Ryan Braun.
I'm sure.
And and he moved on. To all the Brewers fans, I think he turned his life around. Did he keep using? We'll never know.
No,
nothing came up in the testing
anymore.
Good point. So, but getting back to this, the steroid era is what it is. It was that 10 to 15 year period where guys were getting huger and they were hitting more. But I'm sorry, they were destroying the thing that made the game great because you could no longer compare the Henry Aarons to the Babe Ruths.
I'm going to play one thing and then I have another point I want to make on this. But listen to this. This is Don Fear in front of Congress talking about the new programs they're coming out with to to help baseball.
Of substance use is not to destroy careers. Our job is to stop it.
So you just heard it. Our job is not to destroy careers, it's to stop it. So they're not out there trying to destroy careers, right? And he goes on to talk about EAP programs and how it's just like every other EAP program in the country, which is true.
But it's not, though. And Don Fear, for the record, speaking of human beings I'm not a fan of, had to be carried kicking and screaming to where he was, and it took the players
to protect the players.
Well, he was doing more than he was trying to destroy the owners, and he was trying to win all the time. It was that ugly thing between the owners and the players where Fear was just trying to win.
Right.
And the players dragged him over and said, "We want this out of our game." And to the players' credit, they should receive a ton of credit for saying that.
Right.
And it's what finally turned it around to where I think it is most of the 99% out of the game, as it should be.
Right.
Because you haven't seen anybody coming close to these numbers again.
No, and you have the suspensions. I mean, you're talking 60-day
Right.
suspensions. And
I'm going to refer another article that was in ESPN, and one of the reporters took a look at if Bonds never juiced, and they used, I can't remember the acronym, but it was WIZ.
Sure.
And they took a look at it, and they figured that in the year that he hit 72 or 3, whatever it ended up being, he would have only hit 23 or 24 based on his age and his size. And during the all-time home run record, his number would have been way back in the maybe upper 500s, maybe not even mid 500s.
Well, and it stinks too because you take away 600 from meaning as much for Ken Griffey, for Albert Pujols,
Jim Thome,
for Jim Thome, for Frank Thomas. These are guys we should all know, and we don't, because it's like, all right, well, we had the steroid era. Are they a part of it? And those records don't mean as much.
And you're making my case. It's destroyed the most important numbers in the game.
It has, but I don't think there's any reason you can't roll it back, right? And still make sure these guys are in the Hall of Fame. They still brought a lot to baseball. It still meant a lot for baseball to see that.
No, I don't think it brought anything good to baseball. I think looking back on it, you've got to acknowledge that these guys were out and out cheaters and just ban them for life and leave them out of the game. I mean, it's sad that some of those players were allowed to stay in the game after it was discovered they were cheating. I think Braun and Sosa, once they were found out that, yeah, you're cheating, you're out of the game for good. Rodriguez is another one. As good as Alex was in the field, you can't trust his offensive numbers because of how many steroids he took. Right. So he should have been banned from baseball at that point. And I love Alex Rodriguez on the field. One of the great, you talk about comparing errors, as a glove and a fielder, probably as great or greater than Wagner was. But we can no longer have those conversations.
My question is, though, too, okay, so this was my other point I wanted to make, is what about what they're doing to the baseball now? We're seeing more home runs again.
That's been an argument since I was a kid.
But now
because
all of a sudden these baseballs are getting harder, right? Why are people in the stands getting hit? Why do they have to put fences up when they haven't before? It's because these baseballs are harder.
Right.
And so they're coming off these bats a lot faster. They're flying out of ballparks more. How is that any different?
You're still on an equal playing field. You don't have some people.
If you believe Canseco, everybody was on an equal playing field anyways.
I don't believe Canseco. I believe
you had 103 players in the Mitchell report test positive for steroids.
Sure, and that's what did I say? Maybe 10% of the players that used in the baseball used
out of random testing. You didn't test everybody. You're randomly testing, and 103 come positive.
I'm just telling you, I think the real number was in that 10% range, maybe 15. I mean, Schilling was putting the number at 5 to 15 of players he ever knew of. Well, I think that number is way low. So I think Canseco's trying to sell a book. Schilling's trying to downplay the era. I think that real number is in that 10% range of guys trying to get an edge because they've the paycheck and trying to keep in the game for another year.
I just think that makes my point if you can't compare eras, right? You can't compare Honus Wagner to today because they didn't have the same ball, right? It was the dead ball era. They used the same ball throughout. Babe Ruth's records are different, right? But even then, it's different equipment, different styles of playing. It has evolved,
It's
and it's a
evolved, but
different era. You hold it as a different era, and you move on because we're seeing a
okay.
different era now where we're seeing more home runs than we ever have because that ball is now harder.
And
So you
I
can't
don't think
compare the
that's
ball. I'm still going.
I don't
You
think
can't
that's right.
compare the ball today to the ball back then. It's different eras, and baseball needs to get over that and realize we have different eras. You've heard my pitch, and we've talked about how I want to change the game completely, right? It's, again, a different era of baseball.
You aren't changing it completely. Even the changes you wanted to make don't fundamentally change the
doesn't.
on the field. The
It's
guys
a
still have to
different
hit with
era.
a wood bat. They still have to use essentially the same ball. Is it a little bit different? I don't know, because when Ruth was hitting all those home runs, he hit 60. He was dominating.
He did.
Still same type of
Different
ball.
era.
Not a different era, yeah, but still the same game.
I mean, all of a sudden, pitchers were pitching off a different sized mound. I mean, don't forget, in the 60s, after Bob Gibson had that unbelievable year, they literally lowered the mound at that point. So it was a different era
But
because
not a
pitchers were
different
at
game.
a different.
Still a
I'm not
base.
saying it's a different game, but it wasn't a different game with the steroid era. It's still the same game. These guys were
No.
just cheating and hitting home runs a lot farther.
No, that's not true. I mean, say that, and what I've always heard about these guys that were juicing, they could hit the ball 10% farther. Well, that's taking what would be a long fly ball and making it a home run.
It's the same with the balls they're using today.
No, I don't think so, because you aren't seeing the numbers that you saw back in the late 90s. You're not seeing anybody come close to 60 or even 50. You're seeing home runs.
You saw a part-time pitcher, part-time DH, hit 40, almost 50 home runs.
A once-in-a-lifetime athlete that got to that number. But are you seeing 2, 3, 4 people getting to 50 or 60 home runs?
You're seeing Major League Baseball literally break records in how many home runs are hit in a season. Records that weren't broken when the steroid era was going on.
But
this is throughout baseball. There's more home runs being hit today than there has been in any time in Major League Baseball.
I don't think it's that, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I don't think it's that much dramatically, because I remember the 82 Brewers, they were setting records. The people aren't coming close to what happened in the 90s.
Individuals aren't coming as close as they were in the 90s, but baseball as a whole is seeing more home runs than they ever have. And you can't tell me it doesn't have anything to do with the ball.
We're also playing in smaller ballparks than we used to. I mean, all of the new ballparks are more bandbox.
Era. We're seeing more home runs than we ever have, which is a completely different era because of the ball, right? That's the one thing that has consistently changed throughout baseball history is that ball. And it's the same thing you saw in the 90s. People changed themselves. We had steroids. It doesn't mean that they weren't impactful for baseball. It doesn't mean they didn't groom a generation of baseball fans. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I don't want to see Bonds in the Hall of Fame. I'm not a Bonds fan, but at the same time, I hate that he holds the record. I think it should be rolled back.
I'll argue that while for the short term it brought more people in the game, far more people dropped out of being fans because they were just disgusted by what happened. And I don't think you're seeing the long-term health of it. I don't think that short-term game was worth all the long-term pain and hurt to the game that it did.
I think it brought more people in, and I think people stayed.
I don't think they've
because
stayed.
Of it.
I mean, I think they're coming back because of a lot of things that they do. Look, does baseball need to nationalize a game again and stop being a regional game? Yes.
They do. And we're going to redo our first video, right? With it coming up, with the issues they're having with lockout, we are going to redo our first video this week that we had. So if you haven't seen it, you'll get another chance because you and I are going to save baseball. But this is all about the steroid use.
Baseball.
And again, it's a different generational opinion, right? Because I look at baseball as a whole and I see that there are different eras in baseball. You're looking at it as a whole, saying no, baseball's been the same game
for
100 and whatever years. And it just hasn't been. The ball's been different. The mound's been different. The equipment's been different. Baseball has evolved, and there are different eras in baseball.
But the people playing it were essentially the same. They were normal human beings that weren't putting chemicals in their bodies to build themselves up to the Incredible Hulk.
People were slapping pine tar on the ball. People were using spitballs back in the day.
Apples and oranges completely. The pine tar was never an issue. It was a one-time trick that Billy Martin played.
People in the 1930s were still throwing spitballs. You can't even put tack on the balls today without being thrown out. So
and
you
I don't
can't
think
tell
you
me
should.
It's not a different game.
I mean,
it's a completely different game.
It doesn't. Spitball era It cannot be compared. I mean, you're better than that. It can't be
told me
compared.
Honus, not that long ago, you told me Honus Wagner's numbers are the same as today, and now you're telling me that the spitball era can't be counted as the same as today.
It was counted. Those guys never lost their records. Their record was counted, and they said
you're proving my point
no,
that there's
I'm not.
different eras in baseball. And the steroid era, was it a black mark in baseball? Sure. But at the same time, it wasn't. At the same time, McGuire Sosa coming together when McGuire hits the record is one of the greatest moments in baseball history.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say that you want to roll back Bonds. The record is stolen.
It's me not liking Bonds. It
yeah,
really
I know
is.
it. I know it. But you're
not
also
liking Bonds. I think again because I think he cheated worse than everybody else.
To use a great line from one of our favorite movies, Tombstone, your hypocrisy knows no bounds.
It's very true.
And the same normal-sized human beings were playing a game until the Incredible Hulk steroid era came in, and guys were getting bigger and bigger, and it took away from that conversation that could always be had. The fact that 755 is no longer looked at with what he went through, with the racism he faced. Henry Aaron, there should be a Henry Aaron Day, just like they're having a Jackie Robinson Day.
Yeah, I agree.
And his record should still be the number everybody is shooting for. And the fact that somebody cheated to steal it from him is ridiculous.
Listen, the best thing in baseball Hall of Fame is the fact that the all-time home run ball is in the Hall of Fame with an asterisk on all four
Absolutely.
sides. I love it.
I love that guy.
I think that these records should be rolled back. You and I are on the same page with that. However, I do think that these players have a place in the Hall of Fame.
Yes, in a separate room that smells like vomit.
Fine. You
or
said
excrement.
Yes. You just heard
build
it. He
the room.
Said yes, he agreed with me. It's on video now.
Yeah, and then you have to buy a special ticket in order to go into the vomit room and be disgusted by all these people that juiced. And
right.
Bond should leave that room.
We've been going on about this for a long time now. Clearly, you and I are going to agree to disagree on this one, but let us know what you think in the comments below. As you always hear me say, I want to hear what your dad thinks, what your mom thinks, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle. You know how your family works. I want to hear in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to do this part right here, which is like and subscribe and hit that little bell notification. So again, you can enjoy these videos as much as we enjoy making these videos. Before we head off, any last words?
Yeah, please share the video as well so we get this out far and wide so that everybody can see it and comment on it as well. We can't wait to see the comments below.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, let us know what you think. This has been Sports Talk with Dad.
Bye, everybody.